Hello everyone, I'm Sarxos and I did it again. I completed an EU4 achievement in Victoria too. This time I went for an old classic, namely Basileus. According to the description, this achievement requires you to restore the Roman Empire as Byzantium. But that's actually a bit misleading, as it doesn't require you to form the nation called Roman Empire. In fact, this achievement was created before the Roman Empire tag was even introduced to the game, but rather you just have to take over most of the Balkans and Anatolia. However, in order to make the achievement work in Vic 2, I had to make a slight modification. The original achievement requires you to start as Byzantium, but that's not possible in Vic 2, so instead I opted for the next best thing, namely to start as Greece and then form Byzantium. I also ended up making one additional concession, which was to waive the requirement to turn all the territory into cores. I originally aimed to fulfill this requirement too, but eventually I realized it was better to skip it, for reasons I'll get to later. But for now, let's start from the beginning. The run started very similar to the strat I used in my Form Byzantium speedruns. Take advantage of the fact that you start in the UK sphere of influence to get an alliance with them and have them conquer Punjab for you. Then recruit a bunch of Punjabi troops and exploit exiled armies to move them over to Europe. Then justify and acquire state war goal on the Ottomans and declare war for the state of Rumelia. The only problem here is that if the Ottomans end up allying the UK, which they often do, then you can't declare war on them, since you're not allowed to be at war with your sphere leader. As such, I had to restart quite a few times before I got enemy alliances I could work with. Specifically, Ottomans had allied Prussia, which isn't a big problem because Prussia typically can't get military access through Austria or Russia and thus can only send smaller stacks via ship, which can be picked off piecemeal. As for the Ottomans themselves, my Punjabi reinforcements helped mitigate the numerical disparity a bit, but I still wanted to play it safe and initially only advanced just beyond the border to place a small stack of units on one of the nearby mountain provinces, along with a decent defense general. But we want somebody with actual defensive capabilities. Defense 6! You see this shit? Defense 6? Holy crap! I've barely even seen that in my life. That's the highest defense you can get. When the Ottoman armies took the bait and attacked, I quickly reinforced with more units to score a decisive victory. I managed to arrange a couple of more similar defensive battles, along with some opportunistic offensive strikes, until most of the Ottoman military had been worn down. Then it was just a matter of occupying the war goals and waiting for ticking war score, along with war score from battles, to bring me complete victory. As for the war goals, I mostly focused on retaking every core state aside from Cyprus, because those are required to take the Megali idea decision later. The one non-core state I took was Rumelia, which was specifically chosen because if Ottomans loses both Rumelia and East Macedonia, then their capital will be forcibly moved from Thrace to Ankara. This will enable me to take Thrace in my next war with them. While waiting for my truce with Ottomans to run its course, I take the opportunity to attack Egypt to retake my course on Crete. This is a very easy war since Egypt is uncivilized, but it's important not to delay it for too long, as I learned the hard way in an earlier attempt of mine. Sometime after the early game, just about every great power in the world will suddenly become laser focused on sphering Egypt, likely for the opportunity to build the Suez Canal, which means they will all soon be at least friendly with them. This is a problem since being friendly allows those great powers to intervene in any war where Egypt is the target, which is exactly what happened in my earlier attempt, and made conquering Crete exceedingly difficult. Normally, you can avoid having great powers intervene against you by planning ahead and using your influence to reduce the opinion of all other great powers in your target country before you declare war. This is in fact something I did multiple times throughout the run against various targets, including the Ottomans after they fell from great power. But with Egypt this can get difficult when there are so many great powers vying for influence simultaneously, so it's safest to take care of Crete early on so you got it out of the way. When I was done with Egypt, it was back to waiting for the Ottoman truce, but I did not remain idle. Rather, I spent my time establishing an industrial base and researching techs, mostly focused on acquiring nationalism and imperialism. This would be important because one of its inventions, called national fraternity, is needed to unlock the Megali Idea decision. The Megali Idea grants Greece cores on a couple more Ottoman states, all of which are required to form Byzantium, so this decision is massively helpful as a stepping stone on the way there. However, there is one state required to form Byzantium which you can't get cores on, namely Konya. So once the truce was up, I began justifying a war goal to take that state. I hadn't fully researched nationalism and imperialism when the Second Ottoman War started, but it was close enough that I could simply drag the war out until I had enacted the Megali Idea and received my new cores. In the Second War, I was in a much better position relative to the Ottomans, and could therefore afford to be more aggressive right from the start, but with one caveat. I made sure that my enemies added at least one war goal on me before I started beating them down, just as an additional precaution against great power intervention, since great powers can't intervene on behalf of someone who has added war goals of their own. This would ensure that I get no surprise Russian interventions, for example. By now I'd also had time to build up a decent navy, which is useful to ensure that I can keep the crossing over the Bosphorus open to my troops and to prevent enemy blockades. And destroy German fleets, apparently. Wait, what? Why are they losing ships faster than I am? That's very strange. Their navy tech is a lot better than mine. I guess my admiral is really good. That might have something to do with it. After crushing the Ottoman army and occupying most of their land, it was just a matter of holding down my gains while waiting for the Megali Idea. Once I got it, I added my new cores as war goals, but still didn't immediately end the war, because I had noticed that Ottoman reactionaries had risen up near Ankara, so I kept the war going until they were able to secure the capital. I did that because rebels enforcing demands instantly removes any truces you had with that country, so this would allow me to go to war with the Ottomans again almost immediately after signing peace. In said peace deal, I took 4 specific states, which meant I now controlled all the territory needed to form the Byzantine Empire. On top of being a requirement for the achievement, and simply being dope as hell, the decision to form Byzantium also wipes off 10 whole infamy at once. Thanks to that, I was now down to only a few points of infamy and therefore had room to do something a bit more ambitious, namely a liberation conquest on Serbia. In case you're not familiar with this exploit, it basically means that I declare a conquest war on Serbia and simultaneously declare war on the Ottomans to liberate all Serbian cores, which allows me to annex all those cores at once. This is handy because I need several Serbian core states for the achievement anyway, and it also lets me release Bosnia later to burn 5 infamy, since I don't need that particular state. While waiting for the war justifications, I continued to develop my newly rebranded nation. Now that I had the Megali Idea, I was finally free to focus my research efforts on more practical techs, such as military technology, but also industry. In earlier attempts, I had been going a bit too hard on the military, which left my economy in a rather sad state. So this time I made sure that my industrialization could keep up with the army. When my justifications had finished, it was time for the third major war. I started by declaring on the Ottomans and called in my ally Two Sicilies, who actually proved to be very helpful. Most Ottoman troops were positioned in the east, while my war goals were in the west, so I split my own forces accordingly. Once I had the Ottomans comfortably under lock, it was time to declare war on Serbia as well. But... oh shit. I can't believe I did this. I forgot to declare the war on Serbia. Ah, I'm so sad right now. I think it was 1st of February too, so I didn't miss it by a lot. Yeah. In a lapse of judgment, I had forgotten that the conquest war goal I justified on Serbia earlier would expire on February 1st, and I only remember it after it was too late. This is a huge problem, because not only did it waste around 20 infamy on the conquest war goal itself, but it would also make the liberate war goal on the Ottomans useless to me as well. In short, this tiny little mistake would single-handedly set the run back by literally decades in-game. So eventually I decided to do something that I normally really try to avoid. I reloaded the last autosave so that I could correct this misstep. Not proud of it, but in the end it felt better than to let such a small error ruin what had otherwise been a really clean run. But don't worry, I soon thereafter made another, much stupider mistake. I think We could add the Armenian one, because that one, then I can release Armenia from that. That's worth 39 though. Well, it should work. I mean, I'll trust. I'll trust the game. Whoops. I did not think that through whatsoever. I need to make peace right now. Shit! Oh my god, I'm a idiot. Nothing to see here, just casually exceeding the infamy limit for no good reason. This time I decided to suck it up though, and accept one containment and a wasted war goal on the Ottomans rather than save scum a second time in quick succession. While this obviously wasn't ideal, it was still manageable, since I could still go through with the Serbian liberation conquest and then immediately release Bosnia as a vassal to burn 5 infamy, thus putting me below the limit once again. That whole ordeal does highlight the need for proper management of infamy in this run. Up until now I had mostly been retaking my own course, which doesn't cost any infamy, but for the rest of the required territory I will have to rely on more aggressive conquests. For the most part I had no other choice than to simply wait for infamy to tick down passively, but I had a few other tricks up my sleeve as well. Both the Megali idea and the Foreign Byzantium decisions reduced the infamy by a fair bit, and then there's the possibility to release vassals. Aside from Bosnia, the conquest of Punjab in the beginning of the run gave me no less than 3 possible vassals to release: Ladakh, Kashmir, and of course Punjab itself. I wanted to keep these territories for myself throughout the early game in order to make use of Punjabi soldiers in my armies. But once the mid-game rolled around, their contribution wasn't quite as essential anymore. Says their thing. Holy balls! I mean, hello. My containment is over, now I can build troops. Alright, besides that, there's still one more nation that is convenient for me to release, which is what motivated the target in my next Ottoman war. After the truce was up, I declared war to take the state Diyarbakir Van, but in fact I only really needed the western half of the state for the achievement. This conveniently allowed me to release Armenia from the eastern half after the war was done, reducing my infamy by another 5. Sadly, this would be the last nation I could safely release, and so all future infamy reduction would have to come from the monthly decay. While waiting for said monthly decay, it was time to declare war on Greece. Wait, what? Yeah. In case you don't know, there is a small nation called the Ionian Islands right off the western coast of Greece, which at the start of the game is a puppet of the United Kingdom. At some point during the game, there is an event or decision or something which causes the UK to cede these islands to Greece. Apparently, this will happen even if Greece no longer exists, in which case it will simply reappear on these islands. While it would have been nice to get the islands for free, it nonetheless works out rather well for me. Since I still have cores on them, now that I had a small breather from bigger wars, I just quickly went over and reconquered my former nation. As it turned out though, the next big war would come sooner than expected. Every now and then throughout the game, a crisis would trigger where the Ottomans demand their cores back from me. Most of the time these would peter out to a white peace, but on this occasion my opposition refused to budge, and eventually a full-on crisis war broke out. This saw me pitted against the UK, Ottomans, Austria, NGF and Japan, while France and Russia supported me. The odds were firmly in our favor, and we won the war without too much issue. To minimize infamy as much as possible, I usually avoid adding war goals during an ongoing war, since then I have to pay the full infamy cost, while justifying a casus belli before the war usually results in significantly less infamy. But because this war would renew my truce with the Ottomans for another 5 years anyway, I opted to pay the full 11 infamy to add a war goal for Albania during the war. At this point, the run entered a fairly repetitive phase, as it basically came down to taking one state from the Ottomans per war and then passively waiting for truces and infamy to wear off. So this might be a good time to explain exactly what remains for me to conquer. And the answer may surprise you. Here's a map showing which provinces are required to complete the achievement in its original EU4 incarnation. As you can see, this includes most but not all of the starting Ottoman lands, but originally I still expected to have to fully remove Ottomans from the map. That's because in Vanilla Vic 2, you typically can't take the capital state of a country without fully annexing them. And while I could make use of a unique Ottoman event to force your capital to move from Constantinople to Ankara, there is no such event for moving the capital further away from Ankara. So to conquer Ankara, I would have to use a combination of direct conquest and the liberation of other countries, for example Iraq, to reduce Ottomans down to one single state, and only then would I be able to take the final piece of land I need. Or so I thought. There was one crucial thing I had forgotten, namely the fact that I'm a god gamer, or I mean the fact that if you liberate another country from a capital state, that will in fact force the capital to move. It just so happens that the state called Ankara and Adana starts the game split between the Ottomans and Egypt. But after the Ottomans conquers the Egyptian part, they'll have a few Egyptian cores in that state. Even though Egypt doesn't have cores on the province of Ankara itself, when you forcibly liberate a country through war, you always get the entire state, which in this case would include Ankara. As such, once I have taken all the other Ottoman territory I need for the achievement, I can simply force the Ottomans to hand the whole state of Ankara and Adana to Egypt, and then finish things off by taking that state from them. This makes completing the achievement a lot smoother compared to wiping the Ottomans off the map entirely. With this plan in mind, I kept going, gradually chipping away at the Ottomans one state at a time, while spending the rest of the time further improving my technology and industries and trying my best to keep Egypt out of the spheres of the other great powers, in preparation for my eventual war with them. The monotony of this was eventually broken by what was, in hindsight, perhaps a rather ill-advised decision on my part. A crisis broke out for the liberation of Poland from Russia, and rather than taking the very manageable prestige hit for sitting it out, I decided to join the UK, NGF and Austria in their support of Poland versus Russia and France. This ended up escalating into the second crisis war of the run, and while I initially actively aided my allies, I soon concluded it wasn't really worth my efforts, so I retreated into my own land and awaited our inevitable loss. 10 Great Wars were invented, and this rather insignificant crisis war suddenly became the First Great War, which, among other things, meant that if our side were to lose, I'd get slapped by a Great War capitulation, which would force me to disarm for the duration of the truce. Now that losing actually had consequences, I wasn't too keen on just letting the war run its course, but our alliance was already in a very rough state that would be hard to come back from. So instead, the gears started to turn, and in my mind, whispers of a thought emerged, one that urged me to abandon this illusion of sense I had crafted throughout the game, to embrace who I truly am deep inside, until finally... You know, this might be a mistake, but I think it's speedrun time. We will beat the shit out of the Ottomans. I want to truce break twice. In for a penny, in for a pound, I think. Let's go. It's gonna be exciting. Okay, good. Now we'll get ready to truce break again. Okay, truce break time again. Alright, cool. Right, moment of truth. Yes, it worked. Okay, then we just need to take this thing from Egypt. I'll just declare this. No, the war's over. Okay. That means I'm contained and have Great War capitulation on me. I wonder if... Okay, they would accept. Thank you. Alright, okay, so let me just rewind a bit and explain what all this madness was about. Basically, while it was a problem that the Crisis War turned into a Great War, it also offered an opportunity, because it essentially guaranteed that the war would last until one side had achieved a full 100% war score. Since almost every great power in the world was involved, this meant that there were very few powerful nations left that could declare a containment war on me if I happened to exceed the infamy limit. This gave me the idea of committing everything I had to multiple successive wars against the Ottomans and later Egypt, and finish conquering all the territory I needed before the Great War ended. This was made possible by the fact that I had intentionally let the Ottomans keep one single core state of mine, Cyprus, up until now, since Cyprus isn't required neither for the Meghalioidea nor to form Byzantium. So by leaving it for last, I retained a permanent retake core casus belli, allowing me to truce break whenever I want. Truce breaking carries some hefty penalties though, so I didn't want to do it unless absolutely necessary. But now that I had committed to blasting through the endgame as quickly as possible, those penalties really didn't matter too much. As such, I first declared war to take the state of Bulgaria, then broke my truce to liberate Egypt's cores from Ankara and annex Cyprus, before declaring one final war on Egypt to actually annex Ankara. In the meantime, the armies of Russia and France had worked their way through NGF and Austria and were beginning to pour into my country, so I dedicated a few armies to slowing their advance and thus prolonging that war a little bit longer. In the end, I managed to finish the war with Egypt just as my enemies forced my capitulation in the Great War. And so, I had managed to complete the achievement Basileus in Victoria 2. Or had I? As I said in the beginning of the video, the achievement technically requires you to not only own, but also core the territory in question. It is possible to gain new cores in Victoria 2, but it's a slow and highly RNG dependent process. If you're a great power with nationalism and imperialism unlocked, you're eligible to receive the generic coring event, which spawns new cores for you in any territory that has a majority of your accepted cultures, or which borders one of your existing cores. Under these conditions, it would in theory be possible for me to core all the territory I had obtained, and originally I had planned to continue the game until I had achieved just that. However, this presented two problems. The first was that I had just greatly exceeded the infamy limit right as I'd been forced to disarm as a result of the Great War. This meant I had to suffer through a conga line of containment wars from every secondary power and their mother, destroying my prestige in the process and promptly disqualifying me from the Great Power Club. Eventually, after a lot of patience, my infamy had again dropped below the limit, and through a combination of industrial, military, and naval buildup, I managed to regain Great Power status, thus re-enabling the coring event. But that's when I realized the second problem, namely that the generic coring event has a far too lengthy mean time to happen to guarantee that I'd even have time to core everything I needed before the end date. And even if I got lucky enough to manage it, it would be nothing but a passive wait on speed 5 as the game gradually sinks deeper and deeper into late game lag. So in the end I decided that it wasn't worth it, and that I'd be content with merely owning the required territory. Which I think is fair, because in EU4 creating cores is an expected and integral part of every conquest you make, and is thus a fairly quick and consistent process. Whereas in Vic 2, cores represent something different, and are not something you're expected to have in every province you own. And above all else, waiting for cores in Vic 2 is just downright boring, and this challenge is primarily meant to be fun, so why bother? Okay, that's that. The achievement Basileus completed, or mostly completed, in Victoria 2. This one was quite a bit harder and required a lot more intricate strategies compared to the Switzerland leg I did last time. But I had a good time, and I hope you did too. As always, the full unedited run will be linked in the description if you want to check it out. That's it for me, so have an amicable time of day.